Eduardo Bolsonaro wants Trump to treat the PCC-CV and militias as terrorist organizations. But does Donald Trump know that Eduardo received more than $60 million from Vorcaro? A fund in Texas received money from Vorcaro, owner of Banco Master, involved with PCC militias, money laundering, and the biggest financial fraud in Brazilian history.
Vorcaro and the Brazilian mafia, $13 billion moved, diverted, defrauded, and the federal police are still at the beginning of the investigation. The operational model of the institution, commanded by Daniel Vorcaro, presents typical characteristics of mafias due to its structure of coercion and institutional infiltration. The federal police operation, the Brazilian FBI, called Compliance Zero, connects Daniel Vorcaro's master bank to organized crime, factions like the PCC, militias that dominate drug trafficking in Brazil and the world, and dedicated teams to intimidate journalists and opponents. Politicians, magistrates, and former police officers were financed to act as members of a scheme that moved 65 billion reais. To date, the largest sums are linked to influential politicians such as Senator Ciro Nogueira, the leaders of the chamber and Senate Davi Alcolumbre and Hugo Mota, presidential candidate Senator Flávio Bolsonaro, and his brother, the impeached and fugitive congressman Eduardo Bolsonaro, and a fund in Texas, the wife of the minister of the Supreme Federal Court, Alexandre de Moraes, and the Supreme Court Justice Toffoli.
Eduardo Bolsonaro, Texas fund receives a $60 million donation from Vorcaro's Banco Master, bank linked to PCC, militias, orgies, attacks on journalists, purchase of amendments, money laundering, capital flight, and the biggest fraud in Brazil's history. Eduardo Bolsonaro, the Texas fund, and the 134 million raised from the jailed banker. Documents and messages obtained by Intercept reveal the former congressman's role in a funding scheme for the film Dark Horse through a U.S.-based structure. Federal police are investigating whether resources negotiated with banker Daniel Vorcaro, arrested and accused of a 47 billion real deficit, financed Eduardo Bolsonaro's personal expenses in the United States, where he has lived since losing his congressional seat. A fund registered in Texas, legal allies in the U.S., WhatsApp messages with guidance on international transfers, and a $24 million contract with a banker accused of billion-dollar fraud. This is the core of the scandal, placing former federal deputy Eduardo Bolsonaro at the center of a federal police investigation into the financing of the film Dark Horse, a biographical production about his father, former President Jair Bolsonaro. 134 million raised, total amount negotiated with Vorcaro, 61 million raised, already transferred in 6 operations, $2 million US, international payment order from February 2025. According to a report by Intercept Brazil, Flávio Bolsonaro was the direct negotiator with Vorcaro, owner of Banco Master, liquidated by the central bank in November 2025, but corporate documents indicate that part of the funds was sent to Heaven Gate Development Fund LP, registered in Texas, and whose legal agent is Paulo Calixto, the lawyer responsible for Eduardo's immigration process in the U.S. real estate broker Altieri Santana, also appears linked to the structure. Dark Horse. When politics turns into a conspiracy thriller, the film project called Dark Horse, including scenes in which Eduardo Bolsonaro confronts journalists, reinforcing the framing of the press as an active antagonist. Documents about the project's funding circulated on digital platforms and were widely discussed, linking the film to a coordinated communication strategy aimed at international audiences, especially in the United States, where Eduardo built a significant part of his support network. Researchers studying disinformation and electoral campaigns in Brazil identified between 2018 and 2023 the use of automated networks, bots, and coordinated operations to amplify exactly the type of content condensed by Dark Horse in audiovisual format, conspiracy narratives, attacks on institutions, and the emotional construction of a political figure as a victim of enemy forces. The Bolsonaro digital ecosystem, mapped in academic studies published on Archive, functioned as a testing and amplification field for narratives now taking cinematic form. The result is a political communication operation functioning on multiple layers: legal, media, diplomatic, and cultural, with Eduardo Bolsonaro acting as its main international operator. Whether the strategy will achieve electoral effectiveness remains an open question. What years of accumulated reporting make clear is that the confrontation with Brazilian institutions is not an improvised reaction. It is a method.